Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. We're going to talk about some of the best ways to invest in the artificial intelligence boom using ETFs, not individual stocks. I'm going to talk about four of my favorites. Before we do that, please take a minute and click subscribe to my channel. Check out the link you see on your screen. That's fool.com/Frankel for a message from our sponsor, The Motley Fool. You can get the top 10 stocks to buy right now, and it's the best way to support this work we're doing on YouTube. Again, that is fool.com/Frankel. So without further delay, let's get right into it. So the first ETF I wanted to talk about is called the Global X Artificial Intelligence and Technology ETF. Ticker symbol is AIQ, a little over $1.5 billion in assets under management. And as like most specialized ETFs, it does have a relatively high expense ratio compared to index funds. This is an actively managed ETF, meaning that portfolio managers can kind of do what they want in the portfolio. You can see right there, the top holdings are some of like the who's who of artificial intelligence, NVIDIA, Meta Platforms, Netflix, Oracle, Amazon, IBM are just a couple of examples of its largest investments. And it just kind of gives you pretty broad exposure. There's 85 stocks in the portfolio altogether, exposure to a lot of the best AI plays and just general tech companies without having to do too much guesswork and invest in any individual stocks. There's another one from Global X, which is my second one, and it takes a little bit of a different approach. The name might sound very similar. It's the Global X Robotics and Artificial Intelligence ETF. Ticker symbol is BOTZ, bots, for the robotics part of it. Similar expense ratio, another actively managed fund. This one's a little bit bigger, almost $3 billion in total assets under management. It has a 0.18% dividend yield. None of these are very high dividend ETFs, not surprisingly, because these companies don't pay big dividends. They're generally focused on reinvesting their profits in growth. So this is an actively managed fund with global artificial intelligence exposure. You can see in the top holdings, NVIDIA is the number one holding in the fund, not too surprising there. And it does have some robotics plays. You see Intuitive Surgical is one of the largest investments in the portfolio. They are the robotic surgery company. They're the leader in that space. But one interesting thing is that 6 of the top 10 positions are not traded on public U.S. exchanges. So it could be a really good way to get truly global exposure to the artificial intelligence boom. It's definitely the most geographically diverse of any of the 4 ETFs I'm talking about here. All right. The next one, another actively managed fund. There's quite a few of them in the AI space, and this isn't a pure AI play. This is the ARK Autonomous Technology and Robotics ETF. This is from Kathy Wood's ARK Invest. Ticker symbol is ARKQ. It has the highest expense ratio on the list, but a 0.75 expense ratio is not terrible when you consider actively managed mutual funds, which generally tend to average about 1%. So not a terribly high expense ratio for what you're getting. About $929 million of total assets in this fund. It does not have a dividend distribution. And one of the kind of key takeaways for this one is, well, two key takeaways. One is that it invests in more than just AI. This is not a pure play AI company or AI fund. It also has a lot of autonomous vehicle exposure. It has exposure to energy technology, robotics. You see, speaking of autonomous vehicles, Tesla is by far the number one holding, almost 10% of the portfolio. It's a rather concentrated ETF. Kathy Wood's ETFs generally hold anywhere between 35 and 55 stocks at any given time, and tend to be very top heavy in terms of the largest positions. That's definitely the case here. So that's the other key takeaway, is that these are kind of concentrated. But there's also a lot to gain if the companies in these portfolios do very well. This is probably my favorite of the 3 actively managed options, just because it's a little bit more diversified. It's not a pure AI play. And I like the management team. Last but certainly not least, and this is kind of an outside-the-box way to invest in artificial intelligence, and this is just to kind of buy an index fund. The Invesco QQQ ETF is a NASDAQ index fund. Ticker symbol is QQQ. This is kind of the NASDAQ index fund. Um, it has a 0.2% expense ratio. That assets is a typo on the screen you see right there. It actually has almost $250 billion of assets, one of the largest index funds in the world. 0.20% expense ratio is very, very low compared to the others on the list. It's a passive index fund, so you benefit from the lower costs that come with that. The short description of it is that it tracks the NASDAQ 100 index, which is 100 of the largest stocks on the NASDAQ stock exchange. Pays a little bit more of a dividend because some of the big NASDAQ companies do pay dividends. Apple and Microsoft are two big examples of dividend paying stocks, so you do get a little bit of income. But this does have a lot of exposure to AI. So just looking at the top holdings, Microsoft, Apple, NVIDIA, those are three clear AI plays. Amazon has AWS, big AI implications there. Meta, with its metaverse division, a lot of AI applications, and also on its social media side. And one kind of interesting thing to point out is that this is a weighted index fund, like most of the big index funds are. And because of that, and because a lot of these top holdings are AI plays in nature, you get a lot of AI exposure without actually having to, one, invest in an actively managed fund that has a high expense ratio, and two, without having to kind of pick and choose positions and things like that. So you get low cost exposure to AI. Those top 10 positions in the fund make up nearly half of its assets. So if you like those holdings you see on your screen, this could be a great fund for you. So this is a way to get a lot of AI exposure without having to pay a higher expense ratio. And while, a 0.75 expense ratio, 0.68 expense ratio might not sound like a ton of money, your goal with these funds should be to make, 10 to 15% total returns annually. So giving up, 0.68% of that might not seem like a ton, but over time that adds up and can really eat away at your returns. So low cost index funds like this one are a good one to kind of keep your costs down and still get that same kind of exposure. So a couple of different ways you can go here. Hopefully you enjoyed this discussion of AI ETFs. I'd love to hear what you think. Please leave me any comments you might have. I'll do my best to address each one of them individually. And I will see you next time. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to click subscribe if you don't subscribe to my channel already. And as always, this video is sponsored by The Motley Fool. Be sure to visit www.fool.com/Frankel to receive the top 10 best stocks to buy now.